cheating husband gaslit me for years while my mill encouraged his affairs, so I filed for divorce when I found proof and exposed that his mother was cheating too, which made my Phil divorce her and now she's homeless. 2 months ago, I found out that my ex-husband was cheating on me. This was after he had been gaslighting me for years. For the longest time, he tried to downplay his infidelities, even when I would confront him with undeniable proof. I had seen text messages exchanged between him and the women he was involved with. Yet, he would always manage to twist the narrative, gaslighting me to believe that those screenshots were photoshopped and that I was crazy to even believe them. Once I found a pink rubber band and a broken nail underneath our bed, a clear sign that a woman had been to our place. When I confronted him about it, hoping for some kind of acknowledgement, he had the audacity to claim that the items were probably mine, insisting that I was just forgetting where I left my own things. It was infuriating, not just because of the lies, but because of the way he always dismissed my concerns and invalidated my reality. Most of these confrontations would often escalate into heated arguments. I would try to stand my ground, demanding honesty, but he would get defensive and aggressive. He would lash out and call me lunatic or overdramatic for even suggesting that he was unfaithful in our marriage. He would then turn every accusation into an attack on my character, making me feel like I was the problem, like I was imagining things or being irrational. At the time, my ex-husband had lost his job and was entirely dependent on me to cover all our daily expenses. Along with my job, I also had to take care of the household and our son. Every bill, every necessity, every meal, it all fell on my shoulders. After covering the essentials for our family, there was barely anything left from my income. And on the rare occasions when I did manage to save a little, if I gave it to him, he would squander it recklessly on alcohol or on some online game he was obsessed with. When I started refusing to give him any extra money because I simply couldn't afford to anymore, he would erupt in anger. He'd scream and yell at me. Sometimes, his outbursts would turn physical. He'd punch walls, slam doors, or throw things around, trying to intimidate me submission. The fear he created was palpable, and I often felt trapped. There were countless times when I would muster the courage to tell him to leave, to move out, and let me and our son live in peace. But he would then get his family involved in our disputes. His mother, my ex-mother-in-law, was just as manipulative and toxic as her son, perhaps even more so. Whenever my ex involved her, she would storm into our house, not to mediate, but to berate me. She'd yell at me about my duties as a partner, claiming that it was my responsibility as a good wife to provide for her son, no matter the circumstances. She'd go on rants about how I should be cooking for him, cleaning for him, and tending to his needs, even if he wasn't contributing a single thing to our household. In her eyes, it was a woman's work to manage everything at home, regardless of how overburdened or unsupported I felt. My father-in-law wasn't any help either. He'd just sit there during their visits, watching my ex-mill spew her venomous words, offering no defense or support for me. A little bit about me: I'm an orphan. My parents tragically passed away in an accident when I was young, and from that moment on, I was raised in an orphanage. It wasn't an easy life, but I made it through even though I was never adopted. When I came of age, I had to find any job I could to create a life for myself. When I met my ex, I was just 19 years old, young, inexperienced, and incredibly naive when it came to love. He was older than me, seemingly more established and mature, and he carried himself in a way that made me believe he was the perfect partner. At the time, I thought I was lucky to have someone like him in my life. He made me feel special, as though he had everything figured out, and I saw him as someone I could trust and depend on. But little did I know, all of that was just a lie. In reality, he saw me as someone who could be manipulated enough to serve his needs. It wasn't long before I became his personal maid, cook, and helper, doing all the things that kept his life running smoothly while ignoring how drained and overwhelmed I was. He would expect me to handle everything: cooking, cleaning, doing his laundry on top of my other responsibilities. It didn't matter even if I was working multiple part-time jobs just to make ends meet. He still demanded that I come home and cater to his every whim. Things escalated after we moved in together. That's when he began insisting that I hand over my paychecks every month. Naturally, I resisted. I had worked hard to earn that money and had my own bank account for a reason. But he wouldn't let it go. He argued that, as the man of the house, he should be the one in charge of all the finances. He would tell me to just trust him, and argue that he was more responsible than me. Eventually, he wore me down and I agreed to give him a significant portion of my earnings, minus 60% of my paychecks every month. I kept the rest to cover my personal expenses and contribute my share of the bills. Looking back, I realize how messed up the entire situation was. He had no interest in contributing equally or building a partnership with me. He only cared about controlling me and ensuring that I remained dependent on him so I would not escape him. If you are wondering why I ever got married to such a man, it was only because I got pregnant with our son unexpectedly. His mother pushed for us to have a wedding. She insisted that it was impure for us to live together as a man and woman with a child outside of marriage. Her judgment and pressure were relentless, and given my situation and age, I felt like I had no choice. Looking back now, I wish someone could have stepped in to stop me, to help me see the situation for what it was. But I didn't have anyone. I didn't have a support system to lean on, no one to point out the red flags or advocate for my well-being. So, I convinced myself that getting married to my ex was the best option for me and our child. I clung to the hope that maybe, just maybe, things could work out and that he could truly be the partner I wanted him to be. Unfortunately, that hope was misplaced. Slowly, over the years, he drained me of everything I had emotionally, financially, and mentally. The worst part was the fear he made me and our son feel. His anger and aggression made us feel like we had to tiptoe around him all the time. I wanted to leave him, I really did. But I was too scared of what he might do, and he had so much control over me, both emotionally and financially, that I felt trapped. I didn't know how to protect myself or my child from him. Then just 2 months ago, I received a message that became the final breaking point for me. A woman contacted me on Instagram and sent a long, apologetic text. She explained that she and my ex had met through an online game and had been seeing each other for weeks. She admitted that she had no idea he was married, let alone that he had a son. She told me she only discovered the truth after doing some digging on his social media profiles. Once she realized the full picture, she was disgusted and decided to reach out to me so that I would know the kind of man I was married to. Reading her message was like a punch to the gut. I wanted to be surprised, to feel something other than heartbreak, but by this point, I was used to him disappointing me. If he were a calm man, I could have confronted him, but knowing his behavior, I knew that even if I showed him the message from this woman, he would deny everything, just like he always did. He'd probably gaslight me again, making me doubt myself or even accuse me of overreacting. How many more times could I forgive him for betraying me? How many times could I let him manipulate me into staying, despite the damage he was doing to me and our son? That moment, as I stared at the message, I thought of my child. What kind of example was I setting by allowing this behavior to continue? What would my son learn from growing up with a father like him, a man who was dishonest, selfish, and abusive? So, I decided then and there that I couldn't let this cycle continue any longer. I had to leave this man, not just for my sake but for my son's future as well. However, I knew it wouldn't be easy. I couldn't simply pack up and leave. I had to think strategically. If I wanted the divorce proceedings to go in my favor, I needed solid proof of his infidelity. Proof that couldn't be dismissed or twisted by his lies. That night, after my ex stumbled into bed reeking of beer after playing his video games for hours, I waited patiently for him to pass out. Once I was sure he was deep asleep, I slipped out of the room with his phone in hand. It felt risky, but I knew it was something I had to do. For years, he had kept his phone locked away from me, refusing to share his passcode. However, I also knew he wasn't particularly clever when it came to security. I took a guess it was his mother's birthday. Sure enough, it worked. What I found inside his phone exceeded even my worst expectations. There were conversations with multiple women he had talked to over the years. He had exchanged inappropriate pictures, sent flirtatious messages, and even maintained multiple fake Instagram accounts to DM these women under different identities. The more I read his messages, the sicker I felt. This man was disgusting, to say the least. I methodically took screenshots of every incriminating conversation, every photo, and every fake account he had. I transferred them all to my phone as quickly as I could and made sure to delete any trace of my snooping so that he wouldn't suspect a thing. The amount of evidence I found was staggering. It was enough to confirm what I already knew about him. He was a liar and a master manipulator. How could someone be this dishonest and cruel? To make matters worse, as I scrolled further through his messages, I stumbled upon something I hadn't expected to find at all. It turned out that my ex wasn't the only one who was a cheater. In fact, he had learned how to cheat from his mother, who was just as deceitful as her son. There were conversations between the two of them that shocked me to my core. In these chats, my ex and his mother openly discussed ways for him to cheat on me without getting caught. Not only did she encourage his behavior through the years, but she also boasted about her own infidelities. One particular message from her read, "Oh please, it's boring to stay with just one person forever. That's why, when I get bored, I find someone temporarily for some stress release." My ex responded enthusiastically, replying, "Wow, you go, Mom." As though this was something to celebrate. I couldn't help but shake my head in disappointment and disgust as I read through those messages between my ex and his mother. I took screenshots of those messages too, adding them to the growing pile of evidence I had collected. It was absolutely sickening. Not only had my ex betrayed me over and over again, but his own mother had been encouraging him the whole time, treating infidelity like it was something normal, something to be proud of, even. Suddenly, everything made sense: why he was the way he was, why he never felt guilty for lying to me, and why his mother had always brushed off my concerns about him like they didn't matter. That realization lit a fire in me. I knew I couldn't stay. It wasn't just about me anymore. I had to protect my son. I didn't want him growing up thinking this kind of behavior was okay, thinking betrayal and lies were just part of life. I needed to break away, for both of us. The very next week, I began preparing to leave my ex. I knew I couldn't just pack a suitcase and walk out the door. He was a volatile man, prone to violence, and I couldn't risk triggering an outburst that might endanger me or my son. Instead, I started small and secretive. Each day, when I left for work, I packed my handbag with a few of mine and my son's important documents, birth certificates, IDs, anything we would need to start fresh. I left these at a coworker's house, someone I trusted, who had generously offered to let me and my son stay with her temporarily. Over the course of the week, I continued transferring items little by little. Along with the documents, I packed small amounts of clothes and essentials, discreetly removing anything of value that we would need to survive once we left my ex. It was a slow and nerve-wracking process, but I knew I couldn't afford to rush and risk my ex finding out what I was planning. Finally, after a week of careful preparation, I knew the time had come. Everything was ready. My son and I had what we needed to leave and start over. On the day we left, I didn't confront my ex or try to explain myself to him in person. I knew better than to risk another fight. Instead, I left a note behind where I told him that I was done with our marriage. I made it clear that I was taking our son with me, not just because I was leaving but because I couldn't leave my child in his care. I wrote that I didn't trust him to take care of our son, knowing full well that he wouldn't lift a finger to ensure he was fed, clothed, or safe. As expected, when my ex realized what was happening, he was furious. He started calling me multiple times and left me a string of angry, threatening voicemails, warning me that I had no right to just leave him. He also threatened that he was going to find us and drag us back home if I didn't return soon. But I still didn't budge. Instead, I saved every one of his voicemails, knowing they would serve as undeniable evidence of his abusive behavior when the time came to confront him in court. It didn't just stop there. My ex's parents got involved as well. They called me incessantly, demanding explanations as to why I wanted a divorce from their son. His mother even showed up unannounced at my workplace to harass me so I would change my decision. She yelled that I was abandoning her poor son without warning and claimed he was miserable without us. Ex-Mill even tried to guilt trip, insisting that they were the only family I had left and that I should learn to adjust and compromise for the sake of my son even if it meant staying in a situation I didn't want. It was exhausting, invasive, and completely unfair, but I tried to stay strong. Only after I sent my ex the divorce papers, the fighting and threats stopped, and he completely changed his approach. His tone shifted from anger to desperation. Suddenly, he was begging me to reconsider instead of threatening me. He told me that he couldn't bear the thought of living without me, that we had spent so many years together and that he wanted to make things work between us. He even promised to go to couples counseling if I would just give him another chance. But his apologies and pleas meant nothing to me anymore. I had heard them all before and knew his real face now. His words no longer held any weight after everything that had happened. I wasn't swayed by his false promises to change for the sake of our son. I knew what he did and who he was, and there was no way I was going back to that life. This week, we had a final sit down to discuss the details before our divorce was finalized. I could have avoided the meeting, but my ex was insistent on having it, claiming that he needed one last closure and that he wanted to see our son. Despite my son not having much of a relationship with his father, I knew he still missed him in some way. I agreed to the discussion, thinking it was a necessary step for both of us to move forward. The primary focus of the meeting was to settle custody arrangements. Surprisingly, my ex remained calm throughout the conversation. Initially, he did repeat how much he missed me, claiming that my leaving had given him the reality check he needed. But even though he expressed regret, he didn't fight me when I told him I wanted primary custody of our son. To my surprise, he agreed without any resistance. My ex even apologized for everything: his actions, his behavior, and the damage he had caused in our relationship. He apologized to our son also, telling him that he was going to try to be a better father moving forward. I honestly don't know what caused the sudden change in him. It was unsettling to see my ex so calm and collected during the discussion, especially after everything he had put me through. But for the sake of our son, I wanted both of us to be good, supportive co-parents moving forward. The one issue during our meeting was ex-Mill. She had been glaring at me and rolling her eyes throughout the meeting, clearly displeased with my decision and my presence. The only reason she and my ex-Phil were even there was because they missed their grandson and wanted to see him. But she kept making snide comments at me, and it became obvious that my ex-Mill wasn't there to support us. At one point, when me and my ex were discussing our son, my ex-Mill let out a dramatic sigh, shaking her head in disappointment. Then, as if she had been waiting for this moment, she looked at me and said, "I hate that my son even needs to have this conversation. You know, when he first brought you home, I never liked you. I knew you were trouble from the moment I laid my eyes on you. Still, my son was in love with you, and I didn't want to go against him. But now I can finally say that you have always been the problem in this relationship. Because of your selfish decision, now my son and even our grandson have to go through all this." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Was my ex-Mill really blaming me for our divorce, as if I was the problem in this entire mess? Excuse me, but I was the one who had been loyal, the one who had given everything for my ex, the one who had taken care of our home and our child while he did nothing but cheat, manipulate, and take my money. And now, she was sitting there, blaming me? No. That was the final straw. She needed to learn a lesson in humility and understand that she had no place interfering in my life ever again. I looked her straight in the eye, my anger boiling over. Of course, you would blame me, even after knowing your son's cheating history. Why wouldn't you support your son when you're exactly like him, a cheater? He probably couldn't stop cheating because it's in his blood. You knew about every woman he slept with, and you even encouraged him, telling him how you've been doing the same thing behind your own husband's back. So, really, I'm not surprised that you find me to be the problem because, unlike your husband, I'm not a fool to still stay with my cheating partner. My ex-Mill stared at me, speechless. The look on her face was priceless as she realized that I knew exactly what she had been doing behind her husband's back. My ex, too, was stunned, his eyes wide in shock. Until then, they had no idea that I had gone through their messages. For years, they both had kept this a secret between the two of them, but now it was all out in the open. My ex-Mill sputtered, trying to deny what I had just said, asking my ex-Phil to not listen to me. At this point, my ex-Phil was completely confused. He didn't seem to understand what was going on, and asked me what I was even talking about. This is when I told him everything that my ex-Mill had said to her son, how she had openly encouraged him to cheat, and how she had even admitted to her own affairs. I told him about the conversations between them, where my ex-Mill had practically given her son the green light to be unfaithful. By the end of my speech, my ex-Phil looked like he was about to explode in anger, his face flushed with rage as if he wanted to lash out at my ex-Mill right then and there. I could tell he was struggling to process the truth. My ex-Mill, on the other hand, was beet red with embarrassment, caught off guard by the truth I had just revealed. As for my ex, he looked like a child who'd been caught red-handed in a candy store, his face scrunched up in disbelief and guilt. I stood up, ready to walk away from this mess once and for all. I had no more energy to fight with them. "I guess you three have a lot to talk about now," I said, and with a smile, I walked out of the room, leaving them to stew in their shame. Since then, my ex and his mother have been relentlessly texting me, insisting that what I revealed about them was uncalled for, as if I was the one who had crossed the line. They both are trying to turn the narrative against me, claiming that I had no right to destroy their family. My ex-Mill has even gone as far as sending me death threats, accusing me of ruining her marriage, and calling me every vile name she could think of. So, Reddit Ida? Update 1. Thank you to everyone for your support. I don't care about my ex and his mother. They can go to hell as far as I'm concerned. For everyone wondering why I agreed to that last family discussion, it's really about my son. Despite everything, he does miss his father. I wanted to give him the chance to have a conversation with his dad, one that was calm and respectful. It's important to me that my son understands that even though things have ended between my ex and me, his father still plays a role in his life, even if that role is limited. I wanted to make sure that everything was settled between my ex and me, especially with the custody arrangements. At the same time, I have to remain civil with my ex after the divorce. It's essential that we're able to co-parent our son without all the animosity between us. During that last family talk, I wanted to set a foundation where me and my ex could both act in the best interest of our son, even if that meant swallowing our pride and sitting down for that conversation. Also, for everyone saying my ex's behavior has changed since I filed for divorce, probably because he thinks acting all nice will make me change my mind, please don't worry, I won't go back to him. I don't care how calm and collected he seems in front of me, I'll know who he really is and I don't want him anymore. Anyways, since our last discussion, I've received a couple of calls from my ex Phil. It's strange because for the entire time I was with my ex, he never once reached out to me for any conversations. Now, all of a sudden, he has called me twice in 1 week, asking questions. Clearly, he had no idea about his wife's infidelity and wanted to know more. I know this must be a huge shock for him. Be honest, I feel bad for him. I know what it's like to be in a relationship where you think everything is fine, only to find out that your partner has been betraying you. It must hurt him to realize that the woman he'd supported all these years had been hiding something so painful from him. I can only imagine the confusion and heartbreak he's feeling now. But at the same time, I can't let myself feel sorry for him for too long. He wasn't there for me when I was struggling or when his son was abusing me and my son. My ex-Phil didn't protect me, and he didn't stand up for me when his wife was making my life hell. So while I understand his shock and pain, I can't let myself get caught up in that. I've sent my ex-Phil the screenshots of my ex's conversation with his mother. Now he can do whatever he wants with that information. My focus now has to be on my son and building a future for the both of us that's free from this toxicity. Update 2. It's been 3 months since my last update. First of all, I'm relieved to say that my divorce has been finalized. The judge ruled that my ex will pay both alimony and child support, which was a small victory for me and my son. He was also ordered to attend mandatory anger management classes before he could see our son. Surprisingly, he didn't put up a fight and agreed to all the terms without protest. Part of me was expecting more resistance from him, but I suppose it's a sign that he knows I'm serious about moving on and putting the past behind me. Before he left, he made one last comment about his family. He told me that he wished I hadn't exposed his mother, claiming she's going through a tough time with my ex-Phil and how they are going for couples counseling, but there's a chance that her marriage might be over. He basically blames me for what his parents are going through. Honestly, I don't care. They can blame me for all they want just to make themselves feel better. But I'm done with their drama. I've spent enough time being manipulated and gaslit by them, so their issues are no longer my burden to carry. Update 3. Hello, it's been a while since I last updated here. My ex-Phil reached out to me today. He sent me a long message informing me about his decision to separate from my ex-Mill, despite them going for couples counseling. He basically thanked me for opening his eyes to the truth about her and told me how I saved him from spending more years of his life with his cheating partner. In the end, he apologized to me for how wrong he was for not standing up for me all those years ago. Honestly, I'm not sure how to feel about this. Part of me wants to feel some sense of satisfaction, knowing that he now sees the truth, but I'm also not emotionally connected to this situation any longer, so I don't want to respond to him. Since the divorce, I've only been focused on myself and my son, and that's it. Update 4. It's been a month since my last update. For everyone wondering how things have been since the divorce, I can say that my ex and I are doing our best to co-parent in a way that's healthy for our son. It hasn't been an easy transition, and it has taken my son some time to adjust to this new family dynamic, but overall, we are doing fine. I'm doing everything I can to make sure my son feels supported and loved through all the changes. As for my ex-Mill, since her separation from ex-Phil, she has nowhere else to go, so she is now living with my ex. Although I don't particularly want her in my son's life after everything that's happened, I'm still trying my best to keep it civil for the time being. I have talked to my ex and he has assured me that during her stay he won't let his mother interfere between us again or say anything negative about me to our son. I have made it very clear to my ex that if I ever find out that his mother's crossing any boundaries or putting my son in a difficult position, I will take them to court again to ensure she never gets the chance to see him. I know how manipulative my ex-Mill can be, so I'm going to keep a close eye on things. I'm not taking any chances when it comes to protecting my son. His well-being is my top priority, and I'll do whatever it takes to make sure he is okay.